The two men convicted of the 1965 assassination of Malcolm X have been exonerated. Their convictions overturned. We discussed that this morning on the NNPA's Let It Be Known. But first, of course, let's look at the two trials we have been following. Just a brief mention of what's going on there. We begin with an update. A fifth request for a mistrial was made again in the case of the men who killed Ahmaud Arbery. The lawyers for Rowdy Bryant and Travis McMichael and Greg McMichael again demanded that Reverend Jesse Jackson's presence should be grounds for the judge to declare a mistrial. In response, a host of pastors are planning to hold a vigil at the courthouse today. And in Wisconsin, in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, the judge lashed out at the media, whom he said questioned why he hadn't yet decided on a motion by the defense to declare a mistrial there with prejudice, which would mean that Rittenhouse cannot be tried again. Judge Bruce Schroeder said he read in a local newspaper that his actions were unusual. He said he hadn't yet heard from the prosecutors on the motion. Thus, he has reserved his ruling. And we know Judge Schroeder has been known for his unusual antics in the courtroom. Now, let's bring on the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis, Jr. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning on this Thursday morning, Stacey Brown. On behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, we're enthusiastic and glad that we continue to bring these headlines and commentaries early morning with Let It Be Known. And we have 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies all across the United States, led by our distinguished chair, Karen Carter Richards, the publisher of the Forward Times in Houston, Texas. So let's get right into it. Thank you for going over the headlines.
Yeah, absolutely, Dr. Chavis. Always a privilege to sit with you in the morning. Now we turn our attention to the eye-popping breaking news out of New York about Malcolm X. Our guest this morning, the great mayor of the city of Mount Vernon, the former mayor of the city of Mount Vernon, Mayor Ernest D. Davis joins us, and journalist Katrina Hamilton also joins us. Good morning, Mayor Davis, and good morning to Katrina. I think the mayor is having some difficulties with his camera at the moment. We'll bring him on shortly. But
Good
Katrina,
morning.
good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Sister Katrina. How are you?
I'm good, Dr. Chavis. How are you?
Doing fine, doing fine.
Good.
Well,
Go ahead. I'm so sorry. Yes.
No problem at all, Katrina. And as we see the two photos there, the photos of the gentlemen who now have been exonerated in the killing of Malcolm X. Katrina, your reaction when you heard the news?
So I'll speak from a journalist, but I'll also speak from myself, right? From a journalist point of view, and when you're looking at the families and you're comparing it to cases that, like even the Rittenhouse case right now, right? You're like, okay, it took 50 years for Malcolm X's family to receive some kind of justice, right? But then did it really take 50 years for his family to receive justice because his family still feels like justice was not served? And then for the brothers who were exonerated, you have one who's dead. He died in 2009. And this other brother is 83 years old. So most of his life has been gone or taken away. So you're like, okay, well, okay. But I don't know really how to respond.
Yeah, so it begs the question: who did kill Malcolm X? And that isn't that the next step in this?
Well, I think that that's a and Dr. Chavis, can answer this question more so than I can. I can only answer it from a historical context. I can answer it from a nearly 50-year-old woman who grew up in the community. So, like, I was born in 73. So in 75, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had passed away. And right after that, there was a split between the two communities where his son, Imam Worthy Muhammad, took over. And then Mr. Farrakhan revised the nation, I believe, in 77. So, given that historical context, it is really almost taboo I'll answer your question, Stacy. Some folks believe that this is the FBI. This is the government. This is the government using the nation as a ploy, because we have brothers who still to this day will say that I'll do anything for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I'll kill for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, right? So when you have a community who says that, and they're just saying that's the way, their way of saying they love him, right? But when you have this community like this, it's easy to say the nation did this. The nation killed Malcolm. I'll leave
Yeah.
it like that.
And so let me just read this little bit here about one of the gentlemen, Muhammad A. Aziz. He was a member of the Harlem Mosque of the Nation of Islam, who was known at the time of the shooting as Norman 3X Butler. He testified to the jury in 1966 that his legs had been injured the day of the shooting and that he was in such pain that he visited a hospital. He said he never went to the Audubon ballroom. He told the jury that after he returned from the hospital, he was lying on the couch, resting with the radio on when he heard a report about Malcolm being shot. He then called his local mosque. After his call was returned, he said he spoke to a man he referred to as Captain Joseph about the murder. 55 years later, investigators interviewed a JM who told them that he had been on phone duty at the mosque that day and talked to Mr. Aziz about Malcolm X having been shot. JM said he then called Mr. Aziz at home, confirming that he was where he said he was before handing the phone over to Captain Joseph, also known as Yusuf Shah. According to investigators, JM told this story to a number of people over the years. It's amazing that he told this story to a number of people. It was verified, and yet they still convicted him, and he spent decades in prison, Dr. Chavis.
Well, again, the indictment is on the criminal justice system. Remember, Stacey, we talked about this yesterday. This is another example of the gross miscarriage of justice, the gross intervention into this situation by a law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is another indication that there's still a lot about the tragic and unjustified assassination of our dear brother Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm.
And that still needs to be fully investigated. All the truth still has not come out.
Mm-hmm.
And the forces now, first of all, even though it's so many years late, I know Brother Aziz personally. He's a good, humble brother. He didn't deserve to be falsely accused and falsely imprisoned all those years.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they're saying they're exonerating him, how do you give back a life? I mean, I know something about unjust incarceration at the Wilmington 10. My case is a little different because we finally not only overturned our unjust convictions, but we were able to try to restore our lives. And I just in prayer, first of all, for the family of the Honorable Malcolm X. I'm in prayer for the family of Brother Aziz. And somewhere out there, there's still some unnamed guilty parties. And I believe that the law enforcement know more than what they have disclosed. I'm talking about the city of New York, the state of New York, the federal government, and even the international intelligence agencies. They were all following Malcolm. They were all trying to undo Malcolm because Malcolm was such a great leader. I think we should just be reminded, why did all these law enforcement agencies go to this extent to try to silence Malcolm X? Same thing with Martin Luther King Jr. We still don't know all the truth about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., the assassination of Medgar Evers, the assassination of a lot of these civil rights heroes, freedom fighting heroes from the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. So it just shows you that we have to continue to work hard in the Black press to demand freedom, justice, and equality for all people, regardless of your religion, regardless of your race, and regardless of your social economic circumstance.
And it's a privilege now to bring on a man who is pretty much akin to Marion Barry in Washington. They call Marion Barry the mayor for life in Washington. Here's the mayor for life for the city of Mount Vernon, New York, the fabulous Ernest D. Davis. it's a privilege to have you, Mayor Davis.
It's a privilege to be here. We had a little technical difficulties, but we're here.
Mayor Davis, I would say the Honorable Mayor Ernie Davis.
Yeah,
I've known him for many years. It's so good to see you.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen you in a while. We gotta get back. It's a pleasure to be here. But I was a good friend of Dr. Betty Shabazz, of course, who lived in Mount Vernon. And we talked about Malcolm, and we talked about when he died, he didn't have the reputation that he has now. So we owe a debt of gratitude to Dr. Betty Shabazz, who fought valiantly to restore him in the right position in the history. I think we're talking about systems. Systems are put in place to keep certain people down for basically political and economic reasons. And so you set up those systems, and this is part of what happened to all of our leaders who tried to make a change and tried to change people's lives and attitudes, especially Black folks. And so it's really not a big surprise that the systems would be put in place to destroy somebody who is going to make a difference, somebody who's going to make Black people look at themselves in a different way and make society look at them in a different way, and get into changing systems because the FBI and IRS and all of those systems are put in place to keep people in check.
Yeah, and I want to go to a point here. Aisha Mustafa, who is the publisher of the Muslim Journal, she writes in a couple of points here. She says there's evidence of government instigation. J. Edgar Hoover. She says Malcolm was connecting with African leaders that stirred concern in the FBI. He had to be stopped. And then she later writes, through the Freedom of Information Act, if you request records of Nation of Islam, it revealed federal agents within NOI, heavy redaction. She says Hoover was fascinated with Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. Katrina, I'll let you respond. Did we lose you?
I was muted.
Okay, we lost.
So I just wanted to quickly state that, as everyone has stated, we've all had we haven't had personal connections to Malcolm X, but some of us know people who've known Malcolm X, their families, and this is really personal to us because of the implication of trying to uplift Black people, right? And we're still dealing with anti-Blackness in 2021. So when you have a leader like Brother Malik El-Hajj Shabazz, Malcolm X, who is going to Africa and who is trying to, have this Pan-African movement where we're not only uplifting Black people here in America, but all throughout the diaspora. I mean, that's a threat on top of a threat, right? So we're still, even when we haven't even talked about this documentary that had worked towards exonerating our
and we're going to. I
right?
wanted you to kind of, Katrina, go into what Aisha was saying. I noticed that you typed in as well on that point.
So, but my point is, even in that documentary, there is evidence that there was, J. Edgar Hoover, the government, as I stated earlier, was connected to this. We have in all of our organizations, whether it's the Nation of Islam, Black Panthers, people always like to say that Black folks are like crabs in a barrel and we like to destroy each other. But the reality is, when you have powerful organizations like that, there's always someone who, I'll go back to all skin folk or not kinfolk, who are placed in these organizations to dismantle and destroy them. And they have done that effectively to the point where we've lost leaders like our dear brother Malcolm.
Yeah, and James Wright of the Washington Informer, he writes in, and perhaps Mayor Davis and Dr. Chavis, you both can tackle this. He says taxpayer dollars that could have gone to educating children and feeding people went to hunting Black leaders.
That's true. James White is true. I think that, and to some extent, it continues today. Mass incarceration. We're disproportionate in prison, in state prisons. We're disproportionate in prison, in federal prisons. And a lot of the intelligence agencies today, they still monitor what Black organizations do. And particularly during the anti-apartheid movement, when a lot of us started working to support the liberation movements in Southern Africa, anti-colonial movements, a lot of us were targeted the same way back then. So, listen, racism, systemic racism, just didn't begin at the George Floyd situation. George Floyd situation, once again, revealed, like the Ahmaud Arbery situation or the Breonna Taylor situation, or the trial of Rittenhouse now in Wisconsin for killing those people. I think that there's a serious, deep-seated demand for the change and reform of the criminal justice system. I think Mayor Davis is right. These systems were put in place to function exactly the way they function, and that's what needs to be changed.
Yeah, and this is for all of the panel, Mayor Davis, Katrina. When you think about it, this documentary, there was as Katrina mentioned, the documentary really brought to light. It was a Netflix documentary trying to decipher who killed Malcolm X, and it really brought to light a lot of evidence that was overlooked, a lot of things that the government did wrong, which we know they did a lot wrong in this case. But we saw an R. Kelly documentary that led to his arrest and conviction. We saw Robert Durst documentary that led to his arrest and conviction. Why is it that we now seem to have to rely on Hollywood to bring to light matters that need attention or the right attention from law enforcement?
Right, well, Stacey, I would like for our guests to respond, but just let me say that if we have to ever rely on Hollywood, we're in trouble.
Yes.
Because a lot of what comes out on Netflix and all is fictionalized. They take some of the truth and then they fictionalize it. So I would say that what we need is our own production companies. We need to do our own documentaries. That's why the Black press is so important. If we don't control our own narrative, then you leave your narrative. I'll just say this bluntly. People that are oppressed cannot depend on the media of the oppressor to free them, educate them, or push them forward. That's never going to happen.
Well, Mayor Davis certainly knows about an antagonistic media. He spent a number of terms being attacked by the local media there in Mount Vernon, New York. We'll let you speak to it, Mayor Davis.
Well, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to Donald Trump. It sounds strange, but what happened is that the covers were pulled off to expose every agency. Any agency that has been developed by human beings will be corrupt in less than 2 years. And so that's we saw it full circle, how one man controlled the FBI, CIA, everything. He broke every rule. And this country exposed the racist attitude of this country. I remember you got 74 million people believe in this man, who obviously lies and do everything according to what he wants to do. And now everybody in his administration was corrupt. And so if you got a whole country with systems that is corrupt, this is expected. What happened to Malcolm, what happened to Dr. King, but I mean, you can expect, it's predictable that this will happen. Any voice that is raised, Dr. Chavis knows that, any voice that is raised to change the paradigm of what is put out there for control will be destroyed.
Yeah, and you know, our executive administrator Claudette Perry, she says agent provocateurs, Black people, are still today paid by the U.S. government to disrupt and confuse people of color from Black African nation building. I guess, Katrina, that goes to your point again about skin folks and kin folks, right?
Exactly, exactly. And we're still having this problem today, as we all stated earlier. But, going back to this documentary as well, I remember when it first came out, I thought it was a well done documentary. And to Dr. Chavis' point that we need to make our own films. Oftentimes, what happens is when we make our own films, we once again don't have the sustainability to push those films through or get them distributed. It's taken us 20 years to get a film called Bilalian that was written and directed by Amina Bakir Abdul Jabbar to be out. And that film talks about kind of like the narrative of being an African American Muslim growing up in the 70s. But one of the problems with this film, and this is what I had texted my friend Najma about several months ago when it came out, one of the problems with this film is that it is open ended and it allows for people to still believe the nation after they silenced and stripped Malcolm away from all of his posts and possessions were partially responsible for killing him instead of placing the sole responsibility on the facts, likened to blaming Africans for the slave trade because Europeans would not be successful in the slave trade had it not been for Africans. Never taking ownership of the reality is the problem that we're having here. And
Mm.
through this exoneration, with these two brothers, some people still to this day believe that the nation is responsible for killing Malcolm X. And so,
Well,
and go
no, go
ahead.
ahead. I'm sorry, Katrina.
I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say, and what we still need is you know, we haven't talked about the fact, and we all know this, that, the children of Malcolm X were traumatized seeing their father being killed before their very eyes. So if any money is going to be spent, money needs to be given back to that family for the trauma that they've endured and for the trauma of these brothers who were falsely accused. Look
Yeah,
at
and
their
spent a lot of
families.
time.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and Aisha Mustafa brings up a great point, and I remember the movie very well. And Spike Lee, she says a scene out of Spike Lee's movie X on Malcolm. It has a line from Malcolm himself saying that things happening to him were beyond the reach and scope of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. So it goes to the point that the whole panel has been talking about. This goes beyond just simple who did it. It goes to who really are the actors behind this, and the government's mishandle of this from the beginning, or their complicity in this, right?
Yes, there you are.
They did exactly what they got, the results that they wanted. And the danger with people like Dr. King, Malcolm, and big leaders is that if you start to unite Africans all over the world, you change the whole paradigm. Europe couldn't exist without taking advantage of Africa. I mean, how is it that the richest country had the poorest people? How is that? Well, they stripped Africa of all its possessions. And to do that and to stay in control, you have to devise a method that put the wrong people in place to sell out to people. And the danger with people like Malcolm is that he unites Black people throughout the world, not just in this country. That's the danger. So Europe could not exist without taking advantage. Look at what happened in Haiti, all over the world. So we have to look at the big picture. How do we control these people? And you can't say they're inferior. Every time Black people have been given the opportunity, what happens? We excel. And so these people got to be stopped. We
Yeah.
can't. We can't let them do this. So any
Yeah.
voice that is raised must be snuffed out.
Yeah, and Dr. Chavis, this is definitely for you. Aisha Muhammad again, Aisha Muhammad, I'm sorry, Aisha Mustafa again says, in New York, law enforcement saw Malcolm as too powerful. Malcolm was a newspaper man, advocated for the black press beyond Muslim press. He called mainstream newspapers the big guns. He said black newspapers are your protective guns. Keep them oiled and ready. Buy a black newspaper, and he didn't care which one. Support your, quote, truth tellers.
Well, yeah, again, Brother Malcolm was right on point. And I think this discussion is very timely. Keep in mind, we're discussing all these years later, still the tragic and unjustified assassination of one of our greatest leaders, Malcolm X. And at the same time, we're having this discussion. We are having on trial, or white supremacists in various manifestations for killing black people, for killing people who are sympathetic to black people. There's a trial going on in Charlottesville, Virginia right now about what happened in that uprising. And they still have trials to come on what happened on January the 6th this year. Now, I'm talking about something 50 years ago or 80 years ago or 70 years ago. We're talking about this year, and I think that it behooves all of us to listen to what that quote from Malcolm about the importance of the black press, the importance of black-owned media, the importance of us developing our own narrative. And our narrative is, Mayor Davis is right, it's just not a local narrative or a statewide narrative. It is a global narrative. People of African descent, we have to pull together. And I would just like to say something positive. I think that we should learn from history. Truth crushed to the earth always rises. And now we're still finding out more truth. And still don't have it all. But as more truth that we find out, we need to make sure our children learn what the history of what happened in the 1960s, what is going on now. We have to control these narratives. And that's why we should have writers, our own historians, our own institutions, to make sure that we perpetuate the truth and not perpetuate falsehoods, lies, innuendos, and stereotypes.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mayor Davis, I know, as you stated earlier, your relationship with the Shabazz family has been well documented. It's certainly in Mount Vernon. We want to know, have you had an opportunity to reach out in this last 24 hours to any of the daughters of Betty and Malcolm at all? And if so, how are they doing?
Well, Ilyasha was part of my administration, so we're very close. I'm closer to her than the rest of them. I haven't heard from. I tried to reach her. I was not successful, so we haven't talked about it, but we will. And I have a radio show, as you know, and we're going to have her and rest of the family on the show from time to time. But we have to pay attention to really what is behind all of this.
Right.
To keep people from rising all over the world. I mean, I get back to Africa. I suppose African here in this country, suppose we align with Africans worldwide. And suppose we did not depend on this country for the education or economic survival. We would be a powerful force. And in order to do that, though, we have to change our attitude and can do. We should not be surprised what is coming out now, because the system demands that this happens like that. And so the question is, what do we do about it? How do we continue a legacy? How do we build our own communities, our own educational system, our own financial system? And this could be an opportunity to say, hey, people who put you in the position you're in are not going to change, because to them it seems to be to their advantage. And so we have to do things that to our own advantage. I mean, it's very clear to me that this is a wake-up call, and we all know this. Dr. Chavis especially know what the system will do to bring you down, and the publicity that is generated. I mean, I was a victim of all of that kind of stuff myself. So we have a lot of work.
Absolutely. And Mayor Davis, we ask if you have a few minutes as we go off the air, can you stick around for a little bit so we can properly say thank you and goodbye? Katrina, we are running overtime, or we're out of time, but I really wanted you to get in a last word before we do go off the air.
I definitely thank you so much, Stacey. Really quickly, I want to say that the film on Freddie Hampton did a much better job of not only showing a positive light of the Black Panthers, but also showing how the government was involved in dismantling the Black Panthers. I also want to say the Shabazz family is still owed an apology, I believe, and this is from me, from the nation for not supporting their family after Malcolm's death. It's not too late. Words and actions are healing, even if they did not kill Malcolm. We as a community need to start supporting each other.
Yeah, they don't forget, folks, and we're going to continue this, follow this story as these men have been exonerated in the killing of Malcolm X, and it really begs the question, leaves us with the cliffhanger: who killed Malcolm X? Don't forget the NNPA's Midwinter Training Conference kicks off in January on January 19th. We'll be at the Diplomat Beach Resort in Hollywood, Florida through the 22nd, where the theme is the publishing industry, advancing the Black press of America, reaffirming, engaging, and empowering. Visit www.nnpa/events.com to register and reserve hotel rooms. In order to get the NNPA's discounted rate, hotel rooms must be reserved by December 12th. So join us for that. And also, we leave you with a Black fact of the day. And this is a Black fact that I enjoy because I covered the man for so long. In 1996, Ernest D. Davis was elected the mayor of Mount Vernon. He served until 2007. Clinton Young became the city's mayor on January 1st, 2008. But 4 years later, Mayor Davis again took office because the people of Mount Vernon realized how much they missed him. The beloved former mayor continues to have a tremendous presence in this predominantly Black city. Among other things, a long-running and successful radio program called Conversations with Ernie Davis is on WVOX 1460 AM. Thanks for joining us. We will see you tomorrow.